Hi, I'm Pip Waller, and this is Being Human, which is where I talk about various aspects of being a human being from a holistic perspective. And this is the first in a series about menopause and about perimenopause. So menopause is a thing that happens to women that's to do with the reproductive system, the reproductive function of the body. So I'm going to start today by just sort of doing a very broad introduction to the female reproductive system. So I'm going to say that we start at puberty when we're, anything from 9 to 12, 13, 14. We begin what's called menstruation, which is basically the development of the uterus, the womb. It prepares itself to receive a potentially fertilized egg, a potential new baby that it can receive and then grow into a new person. So the uterus has this a special lining, very, very, very juicy. It's called the endometrium. It's a specially adapted epithelial tissue that it will grow. It can grow and grow and thicken and proliferate. And so it makes this thick inner lining of the uterus that can receive a zygote, which is the meeting when an egg and a sperm cell meet and they form a new cell. And from that new cell, all life comes. So this thickening lining of the uterus, this happens from puberty onwards. It happens every month, roughly. We can talk more about that. I'll do another series about menstruation another time. But this happens, that the lining thickens and then it's lost. It thickens if there's no pregnancy. If no pregnancy happens, then the lining disintegrates and is lost as menstrual blood roughly every month. And that process happens from menarche, which is the name of the beginning of the menstrual cycle at puberty, until menopause, which is the end of the menstrual cycle and the end of the possibility of childbearing in women. And so menopause itself happens usually between the ages of 40 and 50. It's considered normal if it's between the ages of 40 and 50. Quite often it happens after that, and sometimes it happens before that. That would be considered early menopause, happens before you're 40. But for many women, it's in the late 40s, early 50s. That seems to be an average time. And the menopause itself, you're not considered post-menopause until you've had a few years of no periods at all. Because coming up to menopause itself, you can have all sorts of wacky things can start to happen with your periods. Sometimes they start to get erratic before they just stop altogether. They can also become very, very heavy. Some women have terribly a hard time in that perimenopause. That's the approach to menopause. That perimenopausal period can have a very hard time with very, very heavy periods. And heavy periods are a problem. They're largely a problem with two things. One is it's quite debilitating to have big blood flow, and also that menstrual blood, that very rich, lovely lining of the uterus actually was incredibly, incredibly nutritious, ready to nurture a new life. So you're losing a very large amount of nutrients, a large amount of iron because it's blood, and other nutrients are lost every month in that lining. So women that have heavy periods, actually this can be all through your life actually, are very often deficient in iron and other minerals and vitamins. So it's a really good idea to think about that. If you're getting heavy periods, you probably need supplementation. You need to up your intake of nutrients because they're being lost in the blood. So perimenopause, this is the period coming up to the time coming up to the cessation or the finishing of your periods. That is a whole subject in itself, and very many women actually, even in our modern world, I've seen even women already in their 30s starting some things that look a little bit perimenopausal. And I personally, I think that one of the big reasons for that is because of high stress levels. So, but many women experience, definitely, if not already in the 30s, then in the 40s, from early 40s onwards, hormonal changes that can be thought about as part of the beginning of perimenopause. And that it means that our levels of hormones, the levels of estrogen and progesterone are the female hormones, and those levels, they begin to diminish. Estrogen and progesterone, those are our two main sex hormones. They're produced in the ovaries, and they're produced from, as we said earlier, from menarche, from puberty onwards. So an easy way to think about them is the estrogen, or estrogen, sometimes it's pronounced. Estrogen is the main female sexual characteristics hormone. It's the hormone that gives the sexual characteristics. They're called secondary sexual characteristics because your primary sexual characteristics are your actual sort of organs, like the uterus itself and the external genitalia, the clitoris, the vagina, the vulva, and the labia, and so on. And then your secondary sexual characteristics are the ones that come because of the influence of estrogen. They include the breasts, they include all the development of the breast, the growing of the breast, they include the way that fat is laid down in a woman, so more fat laid down around the bottom, the buttocks and the hips, softer bellies. The estrogen has this a very powerful softening effect on the skin, and it makes the hair more softer and more sort of shiny, luxuriant. And also the pattern of body hair distribution in the body goes along with estrogen. But estrogen doesn't only have an effect on those kind of more, I'm going to say, external characteristics, but it also has a strong effect on the heart, on the nervous system, on the mucous membranes, on so much of the body is affected by estrogen. So when we start puberty, we have this massive increase in it, and then at menopause we're losing it again. So you can see menopause as like a kind of coming off a drug, because hormones are like that. It's quite a useful way to think of them. They're internally produced drugs. They're chemical messengers that they're made by cells or glands or organs in the body. They flow around the blood, and anytime they come into contact with a cell which has receptors for them, they will trigger various activities. So estrogen, clearly there's quite a lot of effect on a lot of different parts of the body. The other hormone, the other female sex hormone, is progesterone. That's sort of in favour of, for gesterone, gestation. So progesterone, this is the pregnancy hormone. So that's the hormone itself that really made the lining of the womb get very, very, very juicy and secreting, ready for pregnancy. And if in fact we do become pregnant, progesterone then has a massively a high important role all the way through the pregnancy to help with the development of the baby and the placenta and so on, and all the things that support the pregnancy. So in menopause we're losing both of these hormones, but the one that we get the most symptoms from, really the reduction of, is estrogen. So those perimenopausal symptoms and the symptoms of menopause, which include things like hot flushes, often like big mood swings, anxiety, depression, nervous sort of things, often are very different to what a woman has had previously. Can often be, for a lot of women, for example, find a real big loss of confidence in themselves during that, when the estrogen's dropping. Sleep disturbances, these are really common in menopause. Also, like estrogen also affects the bones and muscles, so we have often a lot of aches and pains, a lot of differences in the joints, and there's probably other things, but I'm going to do another specific videos about that, talking about when I talk about what we can do. So that's sort of the bad news, that there's a real often a real issue of withdrawing from estrogen. And after menopause, in fact during and after menopause, then there are quite profound changes in the body, that especially because those of us that live in a world where women's value is very much external, it's very much about what we look like. So women's value women can often feel like, oh, I'm getting old. Actually, men have this too. We've got a massive fear of getting old, and probably it's connected with our fear of death. And definitely menopause is a significant shift into the later years of your life. I'm not saying you're old when after menopause, because actually women really can have, you know, a good 30, 40 years of healthy life after menopause. So it's not the end of your life, but it can feel like the end of life for a lot of women, because it is the end of your reproductive life. There's absolutely no possibility of more babies after that, which for some of us, that's a huge relief. So there are difficult things to do with menopause, which include some of the physical symptoms and the physical changes in your body. But there are also some really lovely positive things, and one of which is that actually you don't have the up and down of those hormones throughout the menstrual cycle, which most women experience, even if you've not had a serious problem with PMT, PMS, premenstrual syndrome or premenstrual tension. Even if you haven't had a serious problem with it, the chances are you've had a bit of an issue, or, you know, you felt more emotional, more teary or more angry at those times. And actually you can have it, some women have a really some women actually have a psychosis, like such an extreme problem with a premenstrual period that they're kind of unhinged in the brain. And but I can tell you, I've had varying levels. I never had quite that extreme of PMT, but I have had, like, you know, a lot of that in the past. And it is absolutely lovely to not have that anymore, to have a much more level experience of life. Plus, there is this great thing that although often you're more tired during the perimenopause and menopausal years, but after it all, you start to get what's called the perimenopausal zest. And that is that because there's no energy going into that menstruation and that preparation for reproduction, so you get to keep hold of your energy much more. And once you're through the rough bit of it, you can start to feel that energy rising up more inside you. So that's like an introduction, and then after this I'm going to make some series about different aspects of what we can do and what the naturopathic and holistic view of menopause, perimenopause and menopause, and how you can think about helping yourself, or, you know, what sort of treatments can work really well for it. So one last thing, of course, as well, is that there's a spiritual aspect to menopause, which is that it's the entrance into our elder stage. So the crone phase of life, the wise woman phase of life, and that is something that really can be embraced and moved very definitely into. So menopause is an initiation, a deep initiation, and we can embrace it as such and actually really use the energy of it as such to move ourselves forward in a very good way in our lives. So anyway, that's the start of a series. I'm Pip Waller. Thanks for listening. This has been Human.